So what okay, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, anything I say will be used as evidence against me. Right.
Or for you.
So what I want to do is share with you a little bit today about memoir writing and give yourselves some tips, techniques, and tricks to help you do it for yourselves and for your own family. We'll do a little exercise afterwards later on, so please pay attention and have your pens and pencils and paper ready if you remember what those are. So as I said before in my introduction, what I do is preserve people's stories so they won't be lost. And how did I start? Well, this gentleman here is my grandfather, was my grandfather, Zichrono Livracha. He was the British Army chaplain that went into Bergen-Belsen 2 days after liberation. And he had a very powerful experience there in Bergen-Belsen, or the displaced persons camp outside Bergen-Belsen. And that shaped his rabbinate afterwards. He was a rabbi in London, in a community in London after the war. And while he was alive, I wanted to write a book about him and his stories. He wasn't particularly interested. We lived apart from each other, and life gets in the way, as it does. And so it didn't happen. And then when he passed away, I said, I have to do it. And I did it. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was the first time I put a book together from A to Z. But thank God I did it. And now, here's the thing. It's not about the book. What I learned from compiling the book are at least five benefits that me and my family now enjoy. One is that I now feel a lot closer to my grandfather than I ever did when he was alive. I think of him often, like now, for example, and he's a living presence in my life. And my children each have a copy and know far more about him and the values he personified than they ever would have had I not done the book. I think, it's not that I think, I know that there's also a subconscious responsibility to perpetuate the values he stood for. That's true of any child who knows their family history. Research has been done about this in Atlanta, that children, whether they're age 4, 44, 104, those who know their own family stories are much more confident, bounce back faster from stress and adversity, and they know they're part of something greater than them, with people who've been through things before them, and they feel a responsibility to continue it afterwards. It's the same for our businesses as well, actually. Here's a quote: when you know why in your business, and you know how and why you started the business, and you pass that on to your employers and to your clients, there's greater motivation and commitment in the team. This is actually a quote from a business book. I just swapped the word businesses for families. So you can storytelling cements a business's most cherished ideals into the hearts of its members. It's the same as a family's most cherished ideals into the hearts of its members. So I'd recommend, in terms of your own business marketing, to, instead of saying, I was established I have 20 years experience and I set up in 1920, that's boring. No one's interested in that. Tell the story. Tell the story. I was just in a closed room now with Yossi, the core trainer, who told me the story of how he got into the business from his own personal experience. Much more interesting and engaging than just a list of historical facts. Another benefit of the book is that it connects first generation to third generation and fourth generation. Often there's a disconnect between those generations, but a book or any type of documentation allows that connection to be cemented. Another benefit is that the book is there, it's on the table. We often dip into it around Shabbat, around Chagim, and discuss the ideas, which also keeps the man and the memories and his messages alive. And number 5, which is perhaps the most important for any family, is that it gives families a lot of constant pride and pleasure to a lot of people. And most important, peace of mind. Peace of mind to me, knowing that I've done this, and peace of mind to my grandfather's family, my mother and her aunts, knowing that they have this document, this historical document, which will now be passed on to future generations. That's the power of recording your stories. Now, it doesn't have to be a full-blown book or a film, but I really urge you, whether you want to write about yourselves, your parents, your grandparents, do something before it's too late. Anyone here thinking of it, or has tried starting, or started and stopped, or stopped and started? Raise hands. Are you awake? Good. So I want to share with you some in the short time I have, some tips and techniques for actually doing it. It seems that one of our most common problems is that we all understand the need and the value of doing such a thing, but it's not a priority. As I find in my own marketing, people don't just wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, I must write a memoir today." It's something we put off. It's never convenient. We don't know where to start. And sometimes our subject, our parent or grandparent, is not as keen as we are. And it's also emotionally difficult, certainly for the elderly, to start suddenly summarizing a life, especially when they're young, they're 75 or 80, and life is not finished yet. Admire stream everybody. So more often than not, it doesn't get done, and the person dies, and within a generation or two, it's lost, and if you're lucky, they're just a name on the family tree. Before we even start to write, we should get a few things clear. Number one, why? Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? It's very important to define as best as you can why you're writing these memoirs, because it can be a long and sometimes tiring and frustrating process. And if you don't have a strong enough why, I mean, this is true for any project or any goal you want to follow, it's easier to get lost or confused along the way. So we'll also help you structure your writing and support your decisions about what goes in and what goes out, what stays out. Some of the more common whys are up here. You can have all of these together. It's important to decide, have one that you're focused on. One of the most common and strongest is because you want to pass on your life lessons to future generations. The last one, therapy, healing, clarity, last week I popped into a potential client in Netanya who lives in a lovely apartment overlooking the sea, whose wife passed away just over a year ago at the beginning of Corona. And he's been very alone, both physically and emotionally. And he spent a lot of the time writing about his wife and their story and how he met her and their story together. And he told me that that's been a tremendous, tremendous help and therapy over this year. Another one of my clients said, my father is very, very proud of his book. It gives him great satisfaction, and without doubt, it is significantly therapeutic that he could share this amazing life story with others. And another question you have to ask yourself is the format. These are formats for those who don't understand English humor. Any type of formats and styles and structures you can use, and you can decide what's best for you. For example, in my grandfather's book, it was less historical and biographical, and more a selection of his sermons that he'd given on the High Holy Days, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, over the years. Another book I did, a Holocaust memoir. The author wanted to write it from the perspective of his 9-year-old self, what he was during the Holocaust. And he did it he went back as an adult there, 50 years later, and he talked about it as an adult, and then he did flashbacks of what happened in that place when he was 9 years old. So that's one interesting format. Another one, the family wanted it for the guy's 80th birthday. So I interviewed him, I interviewed his wife, I interviewed children, grandchildren, and friends and family also sent in brachot. So you decide what's best for you. That's the beauty of these things. There's no set format. There are companies that give you a set format. I'm happy to let families do what they want within the book. Another important decision is content, or as this guy reads it, content. What do you put in? What do you put in? You can't put everything in, otherwise your book will run to a number of volumes. And those of you who are familiar with the genre know that authors often just focus on one particular period of their time, either the Holocaust experiences or their childhood or traumatic transition or business history. So don't feel you have to squeeze in every single thing that ever happened to you. It's not an autobiography. One way of covering that up is just by writing a chronological timeline of the main events, and you don't have to address every single event, and certainly not every gruesome detail or offend anybody, unless you want to, of course, it's your book. Another point is having a deadline. Having a deadline, because same true in life of everything, because like a significant birthday or anniversary, because if one doesn't have a deadline, it doesn't get done. Okay, let's have some fun now. Grab a pen or pencil or your telephone. And this is a technique called the memory list. If you want to start getting your memory juices running, this is one of my memory lists. You write 2 or 3 words that reminds you of an event or something that happened in your childhood or school days. I'll give you a minute to write 10 things. 10 things, so just free flow. Don't think, don't edit. Just write down 10 things that happened to you in your childhood that you remember, or your school, and write them down. 1 word, 2 words that will help you remember it later. Soothing music playing in the background. If you finish 10, you can carry on. Okay, people done? Need more time?
6.
What?
I have 6.
It's hard. I'm surprised. I'm like struggling.
Okay, I mean, it's an exercise you can do yourselves at later on without the pressure of time or other people looking at you through Zoom. It's just a good way to start and trigger the process. You know, any of these I can pick any one of these of mine and say, like, number 7, kidney in the pocket. In biology class, we had to dissect various body parts, and one of them was a kidney, and the teacher handed out 6 kidneys at the beginning of the class, and by the end of the class he only had 5, and he got very annoyed when he couldn't find the 6th kidney, and no one owned up to where it was. And then someone hinted to him that he should put his hand in his pocket, and he did, and he found the 6th kidney, which one of my classmates, not me, of course, one of my classmates had actually put in his pocket. Anyway, I could spend all day talking about the rest of these things, but I'm not here for that. So that's just one technique of triggering things, and each of these points can be a whole chapter as you see fit. Another way of doing it, and Larry will appreciate that, is phototherapy. Using old photos. The quote here has nothing to do with that. I'll get to the quote in a minute. Is using old photos, taking out old photos, putting them in front of the oldest person in your family who still remembers who the people in these photos are, and writing them down, writing down who the people are, who the places are, what the event was, and you can get a lot of stories and memories just by sorting through old black and white photos. And this quote by Mark Twain is the answer to anyone who says, no, I don't want to do a book, it's a waste of time, my life is boring, it's not going to interest anyone. This is what Mark Twain says. And I think we can all recognize that. Anyone you meet, any single person who's ever been born and died has a story. It doesn't have to be dramatic, doesn't have to be Holocaust. Everyone has a story, and it's a story that will interest the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of that family. You know, I know for myself, when my mother-in-law comes here and starts telling about her childhood in Romania, you know, how they took the cholent pot and took it to the bakery, or you know, chased chickens around the yard. It's not particularly dramatic, but the children are mesmerized, and that's what's important. Or something like this Frank McCourt, those of you familiar with Frank McCourt, the author who wrote Angela's Ashes. He had a chat with a skeptical student. The student said, Mr. McCourt, you're lucky. You had that miserable childhood, so you have something to write about. What are we going to write about? All we do is get born, go to school, go on vacation, go to college, fall in love, graduate and go into some kind of profession, get married, have 2.3 kids, send the kids to school, get divorced like 50% of the population, get fat, get the first heart attack, retire and die. Jonathan McCourt replied, that is the most miserable scenario of American life I've ever heard in a high school classroom. But you've just supplied the ingredients for the great American novel. Another thing, another benefit of storytelling, of writing books, is this: telling your story may be the most powerful medicine on earth. I had another client who was 88, and he was in the middle of writing the book, and he had a heart attack. And we thought he wouldn't make it. We thought he wouldn't make it, and we stopped the process 6-7 months, and he came through. And his daughter asked him, "How did you come through? We thought you were gone." He said, "I wasn't prepared to die before I'd seen my book in print." And he saw it, and he came back, and he lived for another 5 years, and he was so proud and pleased to show his book to anyone who would just be willing to see it. Just a proof that telling one's story, as I said before, the guy as well who told his story to himself, writing it down, was very powerful for him during his first year after his wife passed away. Perhaps today, meaningful memory is more important than ever. How many of us have parents or children or grandparents in a different state, different country? Because with higher divorce rates or fragmentation of families nowadays, and the wealth of attention disorders and mobile devices, the rapid pace of life may cause stories and values to disappear within 1 or 2 generations. We're just too busy. We're too busy to stop and listen to one another. Researchers say that because our children are hearing the stories from the digital devices and there is less communication between first and third generations, they develop an emotional isolation radically different than the actual isolation of living apart. And this isn't natural. Children lap up stories of what their parents were like as children. We need to know who we are connected to, how we are connected, and what it means to be who we are. We need to believe in our own humanity and our significance within the human community. And documenting our memoirs helps tellers and readers understand that connection. And writing it down strengthens that connection. It brings us closer to our children and grandchildren. And more importantly, it brings us closer to ourselves. I'll just finish with an anecdote from my latest book that's going to print tomorrow, please God, in time for my client's 100th birthday on July the 1st. He was an eye surgeon in London, now lives in Shoresh. He talks about some of the tales of his patients' visits. He was visiting a patient in London who had a pet parrot in a cage. And after he examined him, the patient said, "When you go out, doctor, leave the door slightly open, please." So he said he did. And then he heard the parrot say, "Has he gone yet?" So I'm gone now. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
A huge thank you to Danny. Thank you so much. Huge round of applause. Does anyone have any questions for Danny? Alan, sure.
Well, Danny, hello, how are you?
Hi, Alan. Good to see you.
Listen, I don't want to divulge anonymity, but I know exactly the person you're talking about. He's a close friend of mine, and he told me about working through the book. I'm very, very pleased because I knew his wife very well, and he's very, very popular here in Netanya. And I'll talk to you. I want you to come and talk to us in Netanya about this, because we had a few people. Helen has spoken. We have a regular Monday afternoon virtual social club, and I think a talk from you will be ideal. So I'll try and book you for after the Chagim, please.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Any more questions?
Really great presentation, Danny. I can tell you know your stuff, and how you presented it is great. I'm assuming you work in Hebrew as well, not just English?
I do work in Hebrew. I prefer to work in English, but I do work in Hebrew. When I work in Hebrew, the only difference is that I send it out to Aricha Lashonit.
Have you ever thought about actually creating strategic partnerships with like MyHeritage? Like, because what you do is so much more in depth. Like, for example, my future mother and father-in-law, they just got, there was actually a concentration camp in Libya that most people don't know about. And yeah, it's very unknown. And my fiance's grandfather was in it and wrote and kept a secret book and wrote a book, and it was just published by the his brother's like the VP of Yehudith Books. So they just published it, but it's not their style. Anyway, the point that I'm getting at is Sarah and Ellie really love their family history and they're on MyHeritage. So if you found a way to connect with people who do that, I mean, it could be just a natural in.
I was actually going to ask also if you like, in my situation with my family, there's definitely like, I've always had this urge to like know more about the past, but from people who aren't alive. So I was going to ask, do you also work with people who wanted you to create the story, but also to find out what that story is? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Which is a little bit different. That's more like ancestry, which maybe is not what you do, but what she said, it could be an interesting partnership for the future if you mix the two things in some way.
Right. So that's more a genealogist's work. So I have worked with one of those in the past. I do minimal research for historical background when I'm dealing with people who are no longer. But sure, I'm open to new ideas and to hearing and to cooperating with people, because I believe this is something that every family needs in some shape or form, whether it's a film like you do, Elisheva, whether it's a book like I do, or some type of documentation that keeps the ancestors and the family values alive.
Right. It reminds me of that show, Find Your Roots. Have you ever seen that? A PBS show in America? No. They take celebrities and they reveal to them like their ancestor that did this or did that. It's very cool.
There's a similar thing in British television called Who Do You Think You Are?
Oh, yeah. Also that, yeah.
Very, very popular. And a lot of Jewish people on it, people who've discovered they're Jewish, in fact.
Yeah, totally. It's very cool.
Any more questions? Yeah, Dvorah. Dvorah, you're on mute. Dvorah, you're still on mute. There you go.
Wanted to say that I think the book is so important because when you read, you internalize and you get more detail. But sadly, we're in the world of video right now also. I feel like if you coordinated with Elisheva and offered that ability to do like the docu-series on the story, it would just make it more powerful. And it could take it up to another level of, I don't know, sharing it on some kind of channel, a paid network.
Thank you. Yes, it is a good idea. What I do at the moment is just a very simple thing. I get the families, once the book is done, instead of filming the interviews, which are long and disconnected and lots of ers and rs, and once the book is printed, I get the family to film the person reading their favorite bits from the book. So they have at least some sort of visual memory of the smile and the glint in the eye. But your idea is a great idea as well. Happy to talk to Elisheva and see what we can do.
Last question, Lloyd.
Yeah, that was very inspiring. It was a real treat. And I'm wondering, what is the operating value that you use to tell these stories? Because as you put it so well, that there is no boring story. So is it hope? Do you always find hope in all these stories? Is it always leaning towards a positive telling of the story? Or is there some other kind of anchor value that you use to lead the way that you tell the story?
That's a good question. I largely lean on what the person themselves is saying, and it's very interesting, Orit, that during the interviews, certainly when you have a long series of interviews, sometimes I interview the same person 8, 10 times, they themselves suddenly understand the pattern of their lives, and they draw out sort of the golden thread, perhaps call it, that has been consistent throughout their lives. And very often it is hope, or it is faith. I deal a lot with religious families, or it is faith, or it is whatever, or a particular friend who gave them a lesson in life that they take with them. And yes, and I've developed over the years the chush, the the sense of what to put in and what to leave out. It's got to be able to be read, and you want to keep it positive, because if it's negative the whole time, no one's going to read it. So you don't escape from the sad parts or the adversity or the difficulties in people's life, but most of these people, thank God, were able to come out of it. So I try to draw out the lessons and how they overcome adversity and how they overcame stress or difficult periods in their life, in order that their ancestors can learn from it and live like they did as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. I think everyone can agree that was an absolutely fantastic talk and one interesting thing that you do. I'm going to put you now into the settings again. It's now 10:23, so I'll bring you out about 10:33, and then we'll just do some quick kind of paperwork before we close the meeting. So let's do this. Do you want to join your breakout room?